Alright guys, hello. Today we're talking about Enochian Magic, what it is, where it came from, and the function of it in a magician's practice. Let's go. So Enochian Magic is actually really cool. It is a style of ceremonial magic that really kind of started up in the 16th century in England, and it was created by Dr. John Dee, who we've talked about a little bit before. But Dr. John Dee and his assistant Edward Kelly did a whole lot of interesting experiments and other such, big projects to essentially create what was a language of the angels and figure out the different mysteries related to angels that would get them closer to divinity, enlightenment, and all these other things. Dr. John Dee is described as like a mathematician, a alchemist, astrologer, a philosopher, all these other kinds of things. And unfortunately for him, he was very interested in the work that he was doing in the time where the witch trials were kind of going ballistic, right? So he actually did almost get arrested and deal with all of that terrible witch trial stuff because he had actually done astrology, like horoscope charts, on Queen Mary and her sister Elizabeth I. And Bishop Bonner, who was apparently really known as like a heretic hunter, was the one doing the interrogating, and somehow Dee weaseled out of that and he ended up befriending Bonner, which helped him kind of avoid too much scrutiny for the rest of the time he was doing his stuff. However, once Queen Mary was no longer queen and Queen Elizabeth ended up taking over in England, Dr. John Dee actually ended up becoming a royal advisor of mystic secrets in 1564. And this title really just kind of translates to like court magician or court astrologer, but it still very much signaled that his whole thing was to just figure out these secrets and do all of this kind of mystic work. In fact, from what I've heard from a friend who studied this, he would just kind of read, sleep 4 hours a day, get back up and start reading his books all over again. The man loved studying all this kinds of stuff, and he really wanted to know how to get to God or get these kinds of secrets, speak to the angels, and do all that prophet level stuff through all of his experiments. And the first time that Dr. John Dee managed to channel an angel was a big deal to him. So much of a big deal that as he kept trying to do it, he would just get so thrilled about, channeling these angels that he would actually forget everything the angel said to him. So at that point he realized he needed an assistant, and he took on Edward Kelly, who, unlike Dr. John Dee, wasn't really so well known for like being a researcher or anything, wasn't really like anyone super important, was potentially a bit of a shyster for reasons I'll talk about in a second, and was just an odd pairing, right? Very strange pairing here. But what happened is Edward Kelly would be the one who was doing the channeling of the angels, and Dr. John Dee would be sitting there with the pen and paper, writing down everything that happened and everything that was conveyed through Kelly via, any of these angels. Now, the reason I say Kelly was a little bit of a shyster is because Dr. John Dee was doing all of this so that he could one day talk to Archangel Uriel, and at some point, Kelly is channeling these angels and gets this message from them, allegedly, that the only way to get the higher level secrets was for Kelly and Dee to literally wife swap and sleep with each other's wives. And Dee, for all his intelligence, said, "Yup, that sounds legit." And despite his wife being absolutely horrified with the whole idea, they all just eventually agreed to do it. And there you go. But all that to say, they did actually find a lot of interesting things, a lot of interesting systems out of this. Granted, a lot of it was probably pulling from Kabbalah, like quite heavily, because we have things like the Sigillum de Ameth, which is this very ornate sigil with many different names of God on it. It's got all these different trappings and all these different ways of going about it. And this is kind of, I think, the sigil they would put down before they did their work. This is kind of like a big seal that would channel these energies more efficiently, from what I understand of what I was reading. And it was in this circle that they would do the scrying that would get them these answers and these revelations. And so they would make also all kinds of grids, really interesting grids that had different pairings of letters in it. And if you've ever seen like a sigil of an angel, you know, like Michael or any of them, see how they're kind of like weird lines that like start here and end here and it ends in a circle? If you look at the grids of letters and then also the way that they would connect these lines, you can kind of see where these sigils were coming from. This is how they would find these names and by extension the seals and sigils that would summon these angels whenever they wanted to talk to them. So it's all very interesting stuff, right? We also get the, you know, the alphabet of the angels. We get this entire dictionary of different words that apparently angels speak with. So it was a lot of crazy stuff, and it's called Enochian magic because it's stemming from the prophet Enoch, right? It's stemming from when the angels brought similar revelations to him, and now they're bringing these revelations again to Dr. John Dee and his assistant Edward Kelly. And one thing that's really interesting is that Dee was very much into the power of prayer. He insisted that prayer was the way that he got a lot of stuff, you know, done, that he received a lot of revelations, and it was at this point, in serious, furious prayer, that Archangel Uriel did come to him finally and speak to him and give him a specific kind of, almost like, I don't know, philosopher's stone, some special stone that would help him continue to do these experiments. And it was through that stone that we actually get the 48 calls or the 48 keys, which is a system that wasn't really like super fleshed out when Dee had it, but was the start of kind of figuring out like how to kind of transverse these many different astral realms where the angels were and get even more secrets out of them, right? However, eventually, you know, Dr. John Dee would die, and his writings would be discovered by British people and put in the British Museum, and they would be, you know, pored over and discussed to the point that a good couple hundred years later in the 1800s, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn would start up, and they were, for all intents and purposes, they were everything but the kitchen sink occultism. I mean, they were combining like Jewish Kabbalah, they were joining Egyptian magic and astrology and Enochian stuff from the manuscripts of Dr. John Dee, all into one big hodgepodge crazy system that would somehow help them achieve the results and effects that they were trying to achieve. At one point, there was even an experiment to try and make one of these entities physically manifest, and they apparently got like an arm and a leg out of the big summoning circle, and that was about it. So, but yes, in 1877 we have the Secret Society of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and they would go for about a little less, maybe just about 100 years before it all kind of just fell apart as an organization. And yes, this is the organization that by the 50s and 60s would have the infamous Aleister Crowley within it, who would eventually get kicked out and get literally kicked down the stairs by W.B. Yeats. But all that aside, this was the place where a lot of the really intricate ceremonial magics that we think of when we think of occultism would come from. If you want to think of occultism with the robes and the circles and the this and that, that was these guys. They were doing all that kind of stuff, and it was just really a lot of pick and take and choose and all that from many different religions and magical systems into something that kind of, I guess, functionally worked, but was definitely interesting. All that to say, though, Enochian magic in itself, which is specifically dealing with the angels, right? Not dealing with the demons or any other spirits, specifically dealing with the angels, was intended to help people, like most ceremonial magic systems, get to God. This is the point of ceremonial magic. It's to gain enlightenment. So if you remember when I was talking about the differences between ceremonial magic and witchcraft with my friend here, my friend Spirit, yeah, witchcraft is very much focused on nature, on getting, material needs met, right? Like prosperity or love or protection or anything like that. Ceremonial magic is about enlightenment, meeting God, basically. All these other kinds of things that are really highfalutin, much structure and discipline and such. That's what separates it from witchcraft. And here with Enochian magic, there is a very specific system and different ways of contacting and discovering the names of angels, an entire language of the angels that one would have to use in order to contact these angels, summon them, and get, you know, further work done with them. Think of any shadow work you've ever done with a deity or with an angel. This is essentially just like medieval shadow work, but like times a billion. And so I don't know how viable it is today. I know there are Enochian witches out there today, but it seems like something that's better off as a piece of a practice rather than being the entire practice. I feel like there are many people who call themselves Enochian witches, which just means they work with angels alone, and that's fine. But Enochian magic itself has some very specific structures that no doubt they do work with. But you don't have to be an Enochian witch or do this kind of stuff to work with angels. You don't have to have the grids and the big giant sigil and all this other stuff to work with angels. You can literally just ask them to come by. Chances are they will. And given that we're in a place where we understand, astral projection and just general meditation and how to figure out egregores from angels and how to hopefully figure out shyster friends who tell us to wife swap from like actual professionals, we can remake these systems without needing to cobble together like literally 20 different religions into one giant ball of mess. Personally, I like to draw on a little bit of this when I'm working with angels, right? Like, I will absolutely use the sigils of the archangels, their name sigils. I will absolutely, meditate and do more ceremonial style practices with the candles and, these seals and sigils in general. Sigil work, chef's kiss when it comes to ceremonial magic. So, of course I incorporate it, but it's not my whole practice, right? It's not the backbone of everything I do. It's just a really useful aspect when I'm trying to do intense ritual work. That's where this shines, in really strong ritual work. So, hopefully that is a, decent overview of where this magic's coming from, what it can kind of do, what it's going on. As far as I'm concerned, from what I'm reading in the books that I found on it, it's quite literally just stuff that Dee was getting from the angels that then continued to help him get more stuff out of angels, which is kind of what most ceremonial magic is. Magic for the sake of getting more secrets so that we can do more magic. But with all that said, if you guys want to explore more, there are definitely a bunch of interesting resources, especially, books and such. So definitely, look into it, check it out, and I wish you guys the best as you spend some more time with angels. So, see ya! By the way, if you want to see these videos 2 weeks earlier, consider subscribing to my Patreon, where you not only get all these videos, but also recipe cards, specific deity profiles, and lots of other interesting things to look at. Video tiers start at $10 a month, so definitely consider checking it out.